Well, greetings and welcome. Welcome to our second in the series of Anything But Ordinary, our speaker series. Tonight's guest is the one, the only, you know, some of us know her well. Some of us are getting to know her, the Reverend Deacon Tracie Middleton. All right, so Tracie, and this is the bio that has been given to us from Deacon Mickey, who's on vacation this week. But I want to kind of introduce you to those who don't know you as well. Tracie serves as a deacon at Trinity, woo, but in Fort Worth. We'll let it be.
Shout out to the Trinities.
Yeah, she's the president of the Association of Episcopal Deacons. She grew up in the DFW area. She went to Austin College and Lamar University. She became an Episcopalian, yes, while living in Southeast Texas. And she graduated from the Iona School for Ministry and was ordained in 2009. Woo. She served at St. John's in Silsbee and then moved to Fort Worth in 2011. And so some of you know her from her time here. She's passionate about the distinctive call of deacons and the gifts that they offer in connecting the church with the world, which is the definition of the diaconate. I love it. She has also helped start the Young Deacons Task Force within the Association for Episcopal Deacons. And she is an icon writer. And so that's just a little bit of a mini introduction to Tracie. And so I want to pass it over to you now that I have just completely, whatnot. And
yeah.
So go for it.
It's really a privilege to be here with you all tonight. And one of the things that I'm realizing as I'm thinking about this is that Trinity Baytown may have been the first Episcopal church that I visited, because I do remember attending a service with my aunt, Linda Walker, even before I moved Southeast Texas and joined the choir at St. Mark's in Beaumont. So my grandmother, Linda's mom, was baptized in the Episcopal Church in Beaumont, which I didn't know until I got confirmed. And when she came to my confirmation, she said, I was baptized in this church. Really? That must have been some need to know information, and hadn't learned that before. So I found out later that I have Episcopalians, in my history that I didn't know about. But Linda, brought me to the Episcopal Church. That was probably the first visit that I made to an Episcopal church. So thank you all for.
We will claim that amazing feat in the spirit. That's wonderful.
For sure. So, and I'm grateful to John for the many visits that he made to my grandmother while she was living in Baytown. So, your community is one that I'm grateful for. So I have some slides that I'll share with you to talk a little bit about icons. And so you can see my screen now, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this first set of slides here we have is an icon whose title is Christ the Teacher. So one of the things about icons is that they are kind of considered in the Eastern tradition to be doctrinal statements. And so that's part of why when people talk about iconography, they say that they write icons or that they read icons, because these images are considered to be a statement of faith, which I think is really fascinating and very inclusive, because you don't really have to be able to speak a particular language to be able to read them. But it does help to have some introduction to some of the visual vocabulary in order to understand a little bit about what some of these statements are. But so you'll notice in Christ the Teacher, I have several different versions or several different examples of this icon, and they're very, they all have the same elements, because it's a statement of faith, And so the elements are going to be the same, although there will be some variation in some aspects of it. But one of the things that I'll draw your attention to, so you'll notice the way that Jesus is holding his hands in several of these. There are two kind of ways that you'll see Jesus holding his hands in iconography, and one of them is where he has 3 fingers together on the bottom and 2 fingers together on the top. And the statement that that's making is the 2 fingers are saying Jesus is fully God and fully man, fully divine, and fully human. So that's what the 2 fingers together represent. And then the 3 fingers together, see if you can guess.
The Trinity.
Excellent. So Jesus is one of the members of the Trinity, and Jesus is fully God and fully human. And so sometimes you'll see Jesus holding his hands like this, and that's what that statement is making. You'll also, I mean, he has another thing that he's doing that looks kind of different, and that is a little trickier, and that's more common in like Byzantine artwork and Russian Orthodox and things like that. That's it's like they're trying to spell something out, and it's basically a monogram of his name. He's spelling out some of the okay, you can see it up in the top right and the top left corner, ICXC. Mm-hmm. And so those are 2 abbreviations for Jesus Christos. So Jesus Christ. You know, so he's just saying his name in the way that he has his hands, because it's an I, a letter I, and then like a letter C, which is kind of the S, and then he's got like these crossed, which is the X, and then the last one is a C. So it's really hard to do your hands like that, but that's kind of what that represents. He's telling you his name.
I feel like some of us should do some of that too. You know, it's like, all right, this is my name. Love it.
Oh, good.
Sorry.
That's excellent. So another thing that I'll point out about the ICXC is you'll notice like there's a little squiggly line on top of the IC here. Maybe I'll make that a little bigger. You see a little squiggly line on the top?
Yes.
So that's just telling you that it's abbreviated. There's letters missing in the middle. Because yeah, it would be Jesus. It would be like this if you spelled it out. And so they just do the first letter and the last letter, and then they put a squiggly line to say, like, we skipped all the middle letters. This is an abbreviation. And so over here on the other side, the XC is the same thing. That's the word Christos, but just the first letter and the last letter. And they put the squiggly at the top to say, we figure you know what the rest of this word is. So we're just going to abbreviate it. But something about iconography that I think is kind of nice is like, it's a rule that you have to label everybody. You have to say who's in the picture. See, so, you know, you put the person's name or their abbreviation on the icon so that you don't require that people automatically know the story. You tell them who it is, which I think is, you know, it's kind of a welcoming thing. Like, we don't expect that you automatically know who these people are. So we're going to make sure that we're transparent about who is in this picture. And so this one here at the bottom, this is a little different style. This is a Coptic style. And so the abbreviation, you can kind of see it there is a little, just done a little differently, but you can still kind of tell that they're telling you who it is and abbreviating his name. So another thing that you'll notice in a lot of icons where Jesus is pictured is there are letters inside the halo around him, and they mean something as well. So the one on the top is a Greek letter like Omicron, but it has a little sound at the beginning, H sound, and so that's ha. which means like the one. It's like a definite article. And then in the ones that are on the side, there's another two letters, and that's one word, own, and it means who is. And so what it's saying is the one who is, and that's, you know, out of Revelation, the one who was, who is to come. And so in Jesus's nimbus, a lot of times you'll have him labeled as the one who is, which is another way of kind of saying I am, you know, which is a thing, you know, a way that we talk about God is. So, and in the nimbus that's around Jesus's head, you'll notice he has like a cross, you know, the three things, and that's a good clue. If you're looking at an icon and you're wondering, is that Jesus? You know, it's a little baby, is that Jesus? You know, if he has three things in his halo, that's Jesus. And if you see like a hand, you know, sometimes the hand is like this, and there's three things in the halo around the hand, that's God, because he's part of the Trinity too. And then if you see a bird, right, like that's a good clue that it's the Holy Spirit, right? But you'll know for sure that it's intended to be the Holy Spirit if it has those three parts in the nimbus. And so when you see paintings of other saints, they don't have that. They just have a regular halo without the three parts in it. So another thing that I'll point out to you is in this one, Jesus is holding a book. And in all of these, he's holding either a book or a scroll. And that's part of why this icon is called Christ the Teacher. And in this one, you can tell like the book is open and you can read, you know, if you knew how to read Greek, you could read some of what's in the book. And same here, although that's, you know, so one of the things that was explained to me by the person who taught the iconography class that I took is that when the church was, you know, trying to explain itself, they used some visual symbology of the culture that they were trying to explain themselves to, which was a Greek culture, you know, and so this icon and the way that Jesus is traditionally represented in a lot of icons is kind of taken from the way that you would paint a picture of someone who is a philosopher or someone who is a teacher, to say like, this is a wise person who is a teacher. And the way that you tell that they're a teacher is because they've written something. Right? And so they need to be holding their book, right, to prove that they are a teacher and they've written stuff, or a scroll, you know, so a scroll is also a type of writing. And so a lot of times in the icons, you would, you know, write something in the book that is like a very well-known piece of that person's teaching. And that would be one way that you could kind of make it clear who this person is. So another thing too that is kind of reminiscent of the way that you would show that somebody is a teacher is the kind of clothing that he's wearing. So he's wearing this tunic that has a stripe on it. So you can see right here, he's got this gold stripe on his tunic. And that was one of the ways that you would kind of show kind of somebody's status. You know, and we still kind of have a little bit of that today in, you know, I would imagine Meredith wears a stole, you know, and that's kind of part of where that comes from is something that shows like this person has some authority in what they're doing. And so they get stripes. Stripes are status. So some of the things that also that are interesting about this icon is you can tell that Jesus has a beard and that Jesus has long hair, and that's different than the Greek culture. And so the icon keeps some things that are pointing to Jesus's ethnic heritage and his culture, to say Jesus is a Jewish man, you know, and he has long hair and he has a beard, and that's something that the Greek people would kind of have recognized as like, oh yeah, we've seen Jewish people and they have beards and long hair, and so it's like he's a Jewish person, because, you know, that's part of what we want to tell you about him. But we also want to tell you that he's a philosopher, that he's a teacher, that he's a wise person, and he has written, you know, or shared teachings that other people are following. And so, so those are just some of the things that if you kind of have a little bit of vocabulary that you can read into this particular icon, which is pretty simple. I mean, it's just head and shoulders and a book, and there's a lot there. Another thing to know that's really fascinating about the colors on Jesus's robes, you'll notice the Coptic style one does this a little differently, but all the other ones Jesus has a red tunic underneath and a blue garment, or like a robe or something over the top. Sometimes it's green, and sometimes those are flipped. But what that means is the red part in under this kind of like vocabulary system is saying like divinity, and the blue part is the world or humanity. And so kind of what it's saying by the fact that he has the red one underneath and the blue one on top is that Jesus is divine, and he put on humanity by becoming human. So like his, you know, his nature, he is God, but he put on humanity to become, you know, one of us. And so like there's a whole lot going on in just the fact that he's wearing two pieces of clothing and they're different colors. So
that's impressive, Tracie. Wow.
Does anybody have questions about any of that stuff so far?
But I want to go look at mine. My icon is of St. Nicholas. I'm really going to check him out.
Yeah, check him out. Yeah. So the next one I'll show you then has I'll point out a couple of details, and so there are icons that are of individual people, and then there are icons that are of like events, you know, that are more of a story. So and something too to know about icons, the word icon itself means window. And the idea is that like when you're looking at an icon, you're looking through it to the Christ that is within that person, you know, and the aspects of God which that person's life reveal. And so you look through the person to see God. That's sometimes people, you know, and in the Reformation, all that, people got all angry about images, you know, and we need to break all these icons and statues because people are praying to statues and pictures, and that's bad because that's like idolatry. But you know, the people who have the tradition of praying with icons, that's not how they use them. They don't pray to the picture or to the person that's in the picture. The idea is the picture and the life of that person is a window to look into heaven, you know, a way to see through what's in front of you to what God is like. And that a person can be kind of a transparent sign of God. You know, hopefully, yeah. Like when, you know, that's the idea, is that we try, you know, to become transparent so that people can see God through us. So anyway, that's what icons. That's what the word means. So the icon of the resurrection. There's a couple of things to notice, and I'll zoom in on this one here. And one of the things that I like, that I think is really helpful about this one is that you can tell that Jesus is a person of color. Jesus is not a white person. And sometimes that kind of gets obscured in a lot of Western artwork because, a lot of people in the West, were more familiar with people with light colored skin. And so they painted, things that were familiar. And
that was a very generous way of putting that, Tracie.
Good. Thank you. So, but I love it when I see depictions of Jesus in artwork that makes it clear that, Jesus is a person of color, and that's part of his identity and who he is. So that's one thing that you can see in this one. So in the icon of the resurrection, there's a couple of elements here. So what's happening is, like, in the creed we talk about Jesus descended to the dead, and there's the idea of breaking everybody out of prison, that all of the souls in prison in Hades or in hell, Jesus went down and got them all out of there. And so that's what's happening in this resurrection icon. Is he's standing on the gates of hell, and they're off their hinges, right? And he's grabbing these people and pulling them up out of their graves. So these little boxes that they're standing in, that's typically how an icon represent a tomb or a grave, is like a little square box. But it's usually like a gray color because it's sort of stone, I guess. But so this is Adam and Eve. So Jesus is pulling Adam and Eve, and therefore all of humanity out of prison, basically. And and you have, I don't remember who all the other people are, but you've got some kings over here on one side, and John the Baptist. You guys tell John the Baptist because his hair's messed up. He always has messy hair. Sometimes he's wearing, his clothing will be made of fur, but you can always say his hair is all messed up. So that's John. Never see a messy haired person, John the Baptist. But I think probably these are probably King David and Solomon and, the kings of the Old Testament. And I would imagine that these are some of the folks from the New Testament, the apostles. And but, don't quote me on that one. I'm not totally sure that that's correct. So I want to zoom in on a couple of things.
I have a question.
Sure.
Tracie, before you move on, can you go back to Adam and Eve? Do they have halos?
They do, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to make sure that's what that was.
Uh-huh. Yep. They do.
And can we acknowledge the beautiful theology that Adam and Eve have halos?
So one of the things that the guy that taught my class pointed out is the way that Jesus is holding the wrists of Adam and Eve. He's not holding their hands like this. He's grabbing them by the wrist. And he said the thing that's significant about that theologically is he's saying that Adam and Eve, or whoever is being saved by Jesus, does not have to be able to participate. They don't have to be able to hold on. That he is saving them completely. And he's got a really secure grip on, and they're not going to fall out of his hands. If they, if this was the way that he was holding, maybe if their hands were not strong enough, they would slip out. But because he's holding them this way, it's all on him to do the saving.
Preach that gospel.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And at the bottom, so all of these little snippets I've taken from different icons of the resurrection, but I mean, like I had said before, they all kind of need to have the same elements. And so even though they're different icons, you can see that that they're the similar elements. So down here underneath the gates of hell, you have this poor little guy that's all tied up. And the idea is that's death. So death has been defeated in this process. And you can see all these little nails and chains and a lock that's fallen off. And the idea there being that like the gates of hell have been like completely demolished. And the thing that was locking it, you know, is broken. Like all of those locks are destroyed. And so no one is trapped there anymore. So the resurrection, in this icon, the resurrection is not primarily about Jesus coming back to life. The resurrection in this icon is primarily about Jesus bringing everybody out of death. All the way back to Adam and Eve. Like, nobody's left in there.
Y'all, what do y'all, how does that sit? That's some powerful theology. How does that sit with you?
Hopeful.
I just love this. I will never look at icons the same way again. I've always loved icons, but I don't think I've really been understanding at this level what it is I've been looking at. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was amazed, you know, when some of these things were starting to be explained, I was just like, this is so fantastic. Okay, so now the transfiguration. And what I want to kind of show you on this slide is that the language of icons gets incorporated into other religious artwork. And so even if you're not specifically looking at an icon, the piece of art that you may be looking at probably has been, or often has been, informed by the language of the icons that talk about these things. So, so one of the things that's nice about this one is it's in English. So the IC and the XC labeling Jesus is still in Greek, right? Because that's just kind of traditional. But you see, like, we have labeled who this is. This is Moses. And we labeled who this is, and that's Elijah. And there's these two little pictures up here at the top. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that Elijah and Moses had to be carried there, you know, to the mountain. So Elijah, you know, was sort of translated down from heaven because, like, he never died. He just, like, got to go straight up there with a chariot, you know. So they had to bring him down, you know. And in some icons, the way that that you see Moses is that Moses is stepping out of one of those little boxes, you know, that he was resurrected in order to be there on the mountain. So there's some differences in the way that that's portrayed. And you can see at the very top here, there's this blue part with some light coming down. Does anybody know what that might be? Do you remember what happens in the
Holy Spirit, dove.
Sorry?
We would, you know, this is my beloved son. It's the Holy Spirit.
Yes. Yep. Well, there's God talking at the top there. This is my son. So, and then you can see, of course, he's got the three parts in his halo there. And one of the things that I like about this one that was explained to me is the way that the apostles they're just like thrown about down here, you know, they're upside down and sideways, and this one, you know, his shoe is flying off. Like, this experience like knocked his socks off. He is so astonished and discombobulated by it. And yeah, like what, so these, you know, this one, he's peeking, you know, he's got one eye open. This one, oh, he just, I can't even look. And this one over here, you know, he is a little more curious. So Yeah, I'm guessing that's Peter because he's saying something. You know, and Peter did have something to say. He didn't know what he's talking about, but he had something to say.
And the
So,
saying was that whoever see God's face die.
But they weren't looking at God, they were looking at Jesus.
Well, that's a good point. So in these other pieces of artwork, you can kind of see some similarities of the way that the picture is arranged. And you can even see like, you know, that one of them has a green jacket and the other one has a red jacket. And there they are with their red and green jackets. And in this stained glass window, there's some similarities. You know, they're all kind of tossed around, and the shape of, in the stained glass, the shape of what surrounds Jesus is very similar to the icon. That particular piece of an icon, this like blue, dark blue to lighter blue thing, it's called a Mandorla. It means almond, I guess, because it's sort of shaped like an almond. But it's sort of a special kind of halo, and I don't remember a lot about that, but there are some of the icons.
For what it's worth, that shape is the shape of the Trinity seal. So I don't know if it means something, but maybe it does. Who knows? In our chat, we've got Winston said, "Isn't it mentioned in the Bible, whoever sees God dies?" So maybe that's why they're covering up their eyes, because they're like, "Oh no, is that not?"
No.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
Wow.
yes, Winston, you're right. That's why they didn't even want to touch the mountain.
So something that I thought, you know, was like, this is a more stylized, like a more modern type of an image of the Transfiguration, but you can see still it has a whole lot of resonance with the icon of the Transfiguration, like the same shape, you know, and those light beams going out, and the positions of the characters, where the characters are oriented toward each other. And so the language of iconography is very recognizable. So even in this one, which is really abstract, you can kind of still see the arrangement of things and in the ways that the light is portrayed, and that you have kind of these three light parts, and then you have these three darker parts down at the bottom. And so that you can, like, if you saw the title and it says this is the Transfiguration, then you can kind of tell, even though it's very abstract. So we talk about the Transfiguration a lot in our lectionary. It comes up at a minimum twice a year, sometimes 3 times.
So much, so much.
So to finish up with, I thought we ought to talk about the Trinity. You know, that just seems appropriate. So some of you may have seen this icon before, and this icon is written by a Russian iconographer. His name was Andrei Rublev. And it's very famous, and I'll tell you a little bit about some of the history of it, and then we'll come back and look at it again. So this icon, the original sort of pattern, you know, the template for that icon was originally something more like this, which is the story of the 3 visitors who come to Abraham and Sarah's house. And like in this large one, they're kind of telling different parts of the story. You've got like these little sort of vignettes that are in, you know, so here's Abraham like meeting them on the road, and, you know, and so, but then the main part of the image is the 3 visitors, who are sitting at the table, and you know, Moses, or not Moses, Abraham and Sarah, you know, bring them some food. And so that, like, this is the sort of the main part of the image that Rublev ended up focusing on. But and sort of an intermediary step was this style, where they don't have like the house. Abraham's house is not such a big part of it. Over here, Abraham's house takes up a whole lot of the picture. You know, but over here, it's a little more of like a hint. You got a little building in the background. And so, like, okay, yeah, that's Abraham's house. And you also have the oak of Mamre. See the little tree there? I'm not sure if that's, you say that name, but so, because they were sitting under the oak, you know, that's where it happened. So you need to have the tree in there. And so here's Abraham, and here's Sarah bringing the food, and so then you have the three visitors sitting there. But what Rublev did, which is kind of interesting, is he just kind of simplified all of that out. We still have Abraham's house. See, there's his house. So he's hinted at, and then you still have the tree. So we still know that that's kind of where that story is coming from. But what Rublev was trying to focus on was the three figures, and saying, you know, talking about the Trinity. And so something interesting is, you see that one's hand? He's doing this, right? And you see what he's wearing?
Oh,
Yeah, red and blue with a little stripe.
The stripe. And so, and this thing that's in the bowl here is a calf's head. Yeah, so that's the, you know, like in the story, Abraham ran and had them slaughter a calf. So that's still part of what's going on. But we've gotten rid of the knife and everything else that was on the table. Because the focus is now, if you'll notice, like their eyes. So these two, you know, this one is looking at this one. And this one is looking at this one. And this one is looking at this one. And one of the things that iconographers do is they use people's hands and people's eyes to communicate things about, like, relationship. And so what would you say then that might be the theological statement of the fact that these three are all looking at each other?
and one.
Yeah.
It's the Trinity.
Yeah, that the whole point of the Trinity is a relationship.
Yes.
That's pretty amazing, you know, that he just conveys that. And another thing that some people have talked about, which I think is really beautiful about this icon, is the fact that it's a four-sided table. You heard about this?
Mm-hmm.
So, and the side that is empty is facing us.
Us.
So the theology of that would be that God has space for us at the table, and we are invited into that relationship. So, yeah, like when you have somebody, I think about who was it? It was the Ethiopian eunuch who's riding along in his chariot, you know, and he's reading something. Philip the deacon comes running up, you know, and he's like, he hears him reading out of the scripture, and he says, like, do you understand what you're reading? And the Ethiopian says, well, how can I unless somebody explains it to me? So, you know, Philip jumps in the chariot there and starts telling him what he's looking at, telling him what he's reading. And so that's how it felt to me whenever the various teachers who have taught me about iconography explain some of these things. Like, do you know what you're looking at? And I'm like, how can I unless somebody explains it? And but once somebody kind of opens it up and tells you what's going on in there, it's just amazing. It's just really, really amazing. And so it's just a privilege to be able to share some of that with you all. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here and tell you a little bit about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So what is standing out to you all in these icons that she's describing? What is resonating with you?
That there is so much more to every one of these than I guess I've ever really taken the time to try to dig down into. And so, Tracie, along those lines, I mean, I love the fact that you showed us multiple examples of, quote, the same event or the same person or whatever. But, you know, when we travel, we do a lot of churches. And so would there be a small portable little book that you could recommend that would say, okay, if you're looking at an icon and you think it's the resurrection icon or the Christ as the teacher icon, here's some things to look for? I mean, do you have some really simple little sources that you could recommend?
I will find out and send, what I find to Meredith, because right off the top of my head, I can't think of that, but I'll check and see if there's a good kind of like little pocket field guide to icons.
And if there's not, then, hey,
there needs to be.
I think now when published a book on icons that has the icons and then explained them.
Oh, there's a lot of great books out there, but like a little pocket field guide, huh?
Yeah.
I like it. Gwyneth, I see you've got, that's resonating with you. There's a place for us at the table, an inviting notion. Amen, right? And so I'm thinking about like how the name of our churches is Trinity, right? And if this is the icon of Trinity, then that icon like is an icon of welcome. That's an icon of like, there's a place for you at this table, which I just think is a beautiful, beautiful notion.
The other thing with the icon of the resurrection is that the Eastern Orthodox churches emphasized that the resurrection wasn't just Christ, but it was for all of us. When he went down to dead, that was rose there and having stand on the gates of hell, pulling everyone out. Whereas in the Western church, we focus on Christ individually, just leaving his tomb.
Yeah, I like that universality of it. Yeah. James has shared with me another good book of a reader's guide to Orthodox icons. So I'll share that with y'all later in our groups. Yeah. Other things that is resonating with you, or you're like, oh, what about this in the icon? What's standing out to you?
How it tells a whole story. How it tells the whole story.
Yeah.
You're looking at a picture, but in my mind, you're back in the Bible and you're reading the whole event is coming back alive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about how just last Sunday we heard that story of Abraham and Sarah and the visitors by the Oaks of Mamre, right? And so now, like going back, a wonderful reflection could be go back with the icon and be like, oh, right? Our eyes are open in a whole new way.
The other thing is that icons flourished before the printed word. And communicating, in pictures, the gospel and the Bible. where it's through the icon.
Yeah, I think they're very welcoming in that way because they, you don't have to be able to read. You can be 3 years old and still get some idea of what's going on in a picture. And you don't have to speak a certain language. You can speak any language at all and still be able to understand something that's conveyed in images. So images are, so one of the people way back there who did a lot of theology talked about the idea of a transparent sign, and that there are certain kinds of signs or symbols that are more transparent than others, because always a sign is pointing to the thing that it's representing. But some signs actually are part of what they represent too. And so they are more transparent in that way. So like the word, like the word table, T-A-B-L-E, that's not very transparent because like you have to know what that means in order to get a picture of it in your head. And you have to also like speak that language to know that that's what that word means. So it's abstract. But if you draw a little picture of a table, it doesn't matter what language it is. Like you can see that what it is. So it's a more transparent sign. So something that an example that people that somebody gave about this is like the name of a person. So who has a grandchild? Oh, fantastic.
I love that, how quickly hands flew up.
So Gwyneth, what is the name of one of your grandchildren?
Mute.
She's getting it. Oh.
The oldest is Jaden.
Jaden. Okay, so Jaden's name, if you saw it written down, it represents him, like it points to him. Like when you see his name, that's who it means. But if you had a photo of Jaden, like that would be even more information about him. Like you could see his expression, his face, like how tall he is, how old he might be. Just the photo itself tells us a lot more about Jaden than just his name written down. So it's
a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Exactly. Yeah. And then if we were to see a video, like if you had a little video on your phone of him talking or doing something, then that's an even more transparent sign. It's getting closer and closer to the actual Jaden, And so so there's this idea that like words, the gospel that's written down in words is a sign, but maybe some of these images are a little bit, in some ways, a little bit closer, a little bit more transparent of what they represent. And then when you meet like a person, so like, the picture of a saint or a person whom you can see through to God, the picture of them reminds you of their life. But if you meet the person in themselves, they are an even more transparent sign of God because you can see God moving in them, and like you can hear God's voice in them, and like so like the closer you get to the real thing, the more transparent it is, and so that's why in our so one of my teachers talked about the idea of sacramentality. We know what sacraments are, but the whole concept of sacramentality is that that things are pointing us toward God, but some of the things that are pointing us that way are also part of the journey, are also part of what they are talking about. Like in addition to being about that, they are also part of that, So so when you meet, each other, like we are the saints of God, right? And nobody's painted an icon of us yet because we don't need to. Because the icon would be a less transparent sign than us physically with each other. So us in relationship is a more close representation of the relationship that God has with God's self and the relationship that God has with God's church. And so we don't actually need an icon until after we don't have access to the person anymore.
That's beautiful. That's powerful. Yeah. Everybody remember this when we talk about sacraments down the road again sometime.
And we will.
Other things that are resonating or standing out or questions for Tracie?
What led you to start learning about this and doing this?
Well, some of my friends had learned a bit about icons and were sort of sharing a bit about that with me. And I had an interest in art when I, was younger, and I had thought, that it might be helpful to do a retreat or something that got me out of my head a little bit, and wasn't so focused on words and theories and things like that. And so I thought, if I were to do something, and make something, and like that would be one way of reflecting that's a little more physical and maybe like uses another part of my brain. And so I have some images of two of the icons that I made in these two classes that I took. And so the first one is, which one is this?
Jesus.
The teacher.
The teacher, right? And so like there's some things that are a little different about this one. So like the wall behind is green and it's got these kind of like stripes on it. And this chair that Jesus is sitting in, like I took a picture of St. John's in Silsby and the bishop's chair. This is what the bishop's chair at St. John's in Silsby looks like, because the idea is the bishop is supposed to be sort of sitting in for, Christ, and the priest, one of the ideas. So I don't know, you may have heard the term vicar.
Mm-hmm.
A vicar. So the idea is that the priest is vicariously the bishop when the bishop can't be there. So like the priest stands in the bishop's shoes when the bishop is not there, but the bishop is standing in Jesus's shoes, right? So anyway, so that's why I put Jesus in the bishop's chair at St. John's, because this icon, the like actual one, is still at St. John's in Silsby. So, and also like on his stripe, I don't know if you can see it, but his stripe has like little Celtic Trinity designs.
Mm-hmm.
Because I like Celtic artwork, and I sort of made the book look like our gospel book that we had at St. John's. So that was the first one that I did, and this was like a week. We took a week, to do that, and so that's where I was able to pick up on a lot of these little tidbits. Is while we were painting, he would explain things to us and tell us little details about some of the parts that we were doing. And so this is the second one that I did, which was quicker. And he's very pink, right? Like I did a better job on this one with getting the skin tone correct, but like here he's very pink. But this is the icon of Christ the bridegroom, and that's an interesting sort of name, but it's the icon that's traditionally carried around in the church in Eastern traditions on Palm Sunday, because like So he's wearing this crown of thorns, and he has this thing in his hand. It's a reed, you know, because in the story it talks about the soldiers, you know, beating him with a reed, and he's got, you know, he's got this robe. Sometimes it's purple, because they talk about, you know, when they were making fun of him, they put a purple robe on him, or a, you know, and said like, "Oh, hail, King of the Jews," you know, because they were making fun of him. But yeah, so I got interested in it from other friends, you know, other people that that I was around in the church, and also just an interest that I had in art.
Just fascinating.
So Gwyneth has added to our chat too that the colors in the pictures are not random, that they're specific and relating to the messages. Yeah.
A question.
Oh, that's a question. Are they? So
No,
Tracie.
I have a question.
You have a question. Sorry. Yeah, go for it.
The stained glass windows in our church.
Oh, so I think it would be better to take a closer look. I don't want to speak out of turn without staring at them, but I will say that for the most part, most stained glass windows, as Tracie was saying earlier, like they draw on these kind of depictions that are in icons. Like they draw on similar kind of themes, but I'd have to take a closer look at our particular windows before speaking. Is that fair to say, Tracie?
Yeah, and too, I mean, there's lots of layers, you know, to the meanings of things in icons, and so sometimes, you know, depending on the person who's making another type of artwork, they may or may not know, like, the meaning of all the specific things, and so they may or may not know, like, that it matters whether it's blue or red, you know, and so sometimes like things that are 2 or 3 removed from an icon may or may not be like exactly the same, you know, with the colors, but in iconography, colors usually have meanings. Although like there is some that, you know, one of the things the guy was explaining to me is like there is some difference in like the Russian icons may have sometimes a different color meaning to some things than say like the Coptic icons, or so sometimes there's differences, you know, it's not always the same, but there's a lot of things that are consistent, you know, but not in every situation.
Thank you. Other questions or thoughts or things you want to ask while we've got Tracie with us, y'all?
Are there iconographers that are creating new icons, say, more contemporaneous saints, or?
Yes, I'm really glad you asked me that. Let me Google real quick and see if I can pull up one example of that. And so talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah. It's amazing too, especially as like they're getting, as icons come into different cultures and different perspectives, right? The icons take on different flavors of those places, or even like social causes. So, you know, there's an icon, Mary Mother of Ferguson, right? Very modern day icons as well, which are different. Oh, Gwyneth, thank you, Tracie. You answered my unasked question. Stained glass painting versus stained glass windows. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So you are you asking what's the difference?
He's on mute.
Gwyneth, can you talk to us?
I was saying, I'm sorry. I know I was muted, so I didn't correct it.
Oh.
I was saying, she answered my question because I was going the icon versus the stained glass window. There's a difference in.
Yeah.
Yes, right. So I have found an example of a newer icon, and hopefully that we have the artist's name here, but I'll share my screen again and show you. So this is a more modern icon of Jesus, and
we can't really see it, Tracie.
You can't see it?
We can only see like an edge of it.
I can see the whole.
I see it.
Oh, well then aren't y'all awesome? I'm sorry. That just must be me.
How about this? Is that better?
It's
I mean, I can see it.
Yes, yeah, y'all are good. Yes, we're good.
Okay. So something that the artist has done in this icon, so you can tell that Jesus still has a nimbus, like a halo, you know, and it is wearing a crown of thorns. But there's a symbol here, which is kind of a yin yang. Is an Eastern symbol of like, there's lots that's going on with the yin yang, but also there's a feather. And these are some Native American symbols that are being incorporated into this icon. And so Jesus again is a person of color in this icon, and they've changed the colors on the clothing, and it's kind of black to white, you know, so like encompassing all of the colors of the spectrum. And so this is by Janet Mckenzie. So Janet Mckenzie is a modern artist, iconographer. So her artwork is really influenced very deeply by iconography, but she also changes it to be able to say additional things that she's trying to bring in. And so she's somebody who's working currently in the mode of iconography, but doing it in a modern sort of variation.
Thank you. That's really great. So any other questions for Tracie, y'all? Great questions for Tracie. So my hope is, again, this is part of our series on anything but ordinary, or creating ordo and rules of life in the ordinary time that we find ourselves, which is anything but ordinary, right? And so my hope is that this insight, this window, pardon the pun, into icons might give you something fresh, give you a new perspective, a new sight, new eyes to see as we're establishing our own kind of ordos and our rules in this time. And so if you know icons well, revisit them, bring out your old friends. I brought out my Trinity friend, right? If they're new, like read, pick them up, you know, down the road, you know, when we're back and having quiet mornings, you're like, oh, this is why we have icons at the church. Now you have some insight. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Tracie, for giving us some wisdom.
Wonderful.
Thank
you.
Yeah.
Tracie,
John. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are you making or drawing icons, writing icons? I should say, are you writing any icons?
I haven't lately. But that is something that I want to continue doing. I just, it usually is like a chunk of time that, and so I need to kind of set aside, you know, some time for that. But I have started a couple. I was working on one for St. Stephen's, which is the church where I previously was. You know, and St. Stephen is one of the first, you know, kind of the proto-martyr, the first martyr, but also usually considered like the first deacon. And so I was working on an icon of St. Stephen that I was trying to use the sort of Celtic style of the way that faces are done, like from the Book of Kells and that sort of thing. So I was kind of trying to do a little of that mixing for that icon, but I haven't finished it. And then I was also wanting to work on one for a saint that I didn't really know very much about, called Saint Florian, who is the patron saint of firefighters. Because I used to be a chaplain to a fire department. And so I was like, oh, I wonder who's the saint for firefighters. Florian, as it turns out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Tracie, as thank you. I just, on behalf of your first Episcopal Church family,
Yes.
Trinity, who welcomed you and had a spot at the table and invited you in to the Episcopal Church. We're totally claiming that with the Spirit's help.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you. I think, y'all, it's been a delight, has it not?
Oh, it's just fascinating.
Yes, it's been wonderful.
Yeah.
Nice to see she grew up.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And so, Tracie, as a deacon, will you give us a dismissal?
Sure. Let us go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.